So, let's talk about fear. Why are women in slasher movies always running barefoot? Why are they wearing tank tops like from Wet Seal 2003? And why do they always die in the woods for the cardinal sin of having a personality? It's very easy to say that slashers were about women's greatest fear. The stereotypical walking down the street, getting chased by a guy with a hockey mask at night. Not that, I would know. But here's the truth. Slashers were never about what women feared. They were about what men fear about women and what men fantasize about doing with those fears. This is a story about projection and power, and the male gaze duct taped to a chainsaw and sold as weekend entertainment. But then, women took the lens and the knife, and the horror genre was never the same again. Alright, let me put you on some game. Slasher basics. Hot teens, isolated location, sleazy, dirtbag core, and very horny. Vibes are doomed. One by one they get final destination by some dude in a mask with mommy issues, but then, you look closer. The guys, quick deaths. Off screen, barely any blood. Might as well be red shirts from Star Trek. The girls, drawn out, choreographed, screaming, nude adjacent, and the cinematography by way too into productions. It's not about fear, it's about power. It's about control, it's about watching women suffer and calling it catharsis. As a footnote, this genre was largely sculpted by the same industry that let Harvey Weinstein operate like Jason Voorhees with the producer credit. And Hollywood didn't invent the final girl, it mass-produced her. Look at Jamie Lee Curtis. She was a Nepo baby in the system already, and it was guilt cosplay. They weren't just movies, they were rituals, mass-market morality plays that punished women for being interesting or having their own arcs, and a lot of them were based on real men. Real killers, real trauma candy. You look at Ed Gein, now technically not a serial killer, but adjacent. He turned his mother complex into interior design, inspired Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs. He was Pinterest for necrophiliacs. And could you imagine a zombie apocalypse movie where the survivors are necrophiliacs? And then you got Ted Bundy, charming, clean cut, lured women with fake injuries, the prototype for everybody seemed so normal villain. I think he would have been a Minecraft streamer these days. Then you have the Zodiac killer, cryptic, random, unknowable male rage, the patron saint of white guys with too many puzzles and right-wing TikTok edits. And then you got Richard Ramirez, who inspired Smooth Criminal by Michael Jackson. He broke into homes, attacked sleeping women, Freddy Krueger without the punchlines, essentially. And these slasher genres, they took these monsters, slapped a mask on them, and sold them for teenagers for $8 a ticket and a trauma kink. And imagine turning real-world gendered violence into a Hot Topic merch. That's what horror did. Modern horror, slasher at least, and we cheered. Meanwhile, real women are trying to speak up about real predators, and Hollywood said, shush, we're busy filming a scream queen getting gutted in a cornfield. Nancy and Sally, they didn't win, they just didn't die. The rules were clear. Don't drink, don't flirt, don't fuck, and don't do anything a 1980s dad would disapprove of.
I'm sure he could smell it. No, he didn't. Did. See the look on his face? He always looks like that.
Unless you're a Ron Jeremy, then we talk about the whole shaboing-a-boing. You gotta survive by being digestible and survive by being small. The final girl wasn't a feminist icon, she was the acceptable sacrifice. The camera never lets her rest, never lets her breathe. She's always afraid, always running, and always reacting. She's not a character, she's a thesis statement. Women who behave live, women who don't die screaming. Final girls were Reagan-era propaganda and Converse sneakers, all this while America was in a moral panic about teen sex, drugs, Dungeons and Dragons, and, you ready for this? The gays. Before we jump into Scream, it's worth pausing to recognize two outliers in the classic slasher canon. They weren't just survivors, though, they fought back. Really fought back, and in doing so they cracked the template before it fully calcified into a cliche. You have Ellen Ripley from 1979's Alien, She isn't just a final girl in the classic slasher sense. I mean, there's no cabin in the woods, no masked man, but structurally, Alien is a chamber slasher. Ridley Scott himself said it was very much inspired by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Alien is a slasher, you know, and it's an isolated setting, crew picked off one by one, and looming in the dark, an unknowable, hypersexual, violently gestating death machine. It's Freddy Krueger meets H.R. Geiger. Ripley isn't set up to win. She's not the captain. She's not the typical action hero. She's not the muscle. She's a trucker in a tank top. But when the system collapses and when the men around her flail, doubt, or die, Ripley adapts. She observes. She builds strategy from fear. And when the time comes, she doesn't scream. She suits up. She throws the monster into space with a flare and a middle finger. Her survival isn't passive. It's defiant. More importantly, she's not punished for surviving. She's not reabsorbed into the domestic. She doesn't return to a boyfriend or a husband or a wedding dress. She returns to deep space and more trauma. And eventually, a xenomorph queen. Ripley is horror's reluctant war general, the prototype of a woman whose fear becomes armor. Then there's Nancy Thompson, arguably the most cerebral of the early final girls. Nancy doesn't just fight Freddy, she understands him. While the adults gaslight and ignore her, Nancy gets tactical. She studies his rules, booby traps the dream world, and literally drags him into reality. I mean, the third act is pretty much Home Alone meets The Purge. And when that doesn't work, she does something wilder. She withdraws her fear, she emotionally neuters the monster, she says, "You're not real," and turns her back. And that's huge, that's revolutionary, because until that moment, fear had been currency, the thing the camera fed on. And Nancy refusing to perform it, that's rebellion in a meta sense.
It's too late, Krueger. I know the secret now. This is just a dream. You're not alive. This whole thing is just a dream. I want my mother and friend again.
A girl taking her fear off the screen. You see it even more in A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, which I'm counting as a direct sequel. 2 doesn't count. And you see her come back as a mentor, a shaman, almost like a Obi-Wan Kenobi of this ongoing franchise. And you could even draw parallels there to Linda Hamilton's character in the first Terminator. And yes, the first Terminator is a slasher. It's written and structured like a slasher. James Cameron said he and his ex-girlfriend Gail Ann Hurd envisioned it as a tech-noir slasher. What happens? It's a woman fated to be a general who goes from a ditzy waitress in the middle of LA to stopping a literal killing machine. She goes from not believing the prophecies about her and her future son leading the war to telling Michael Biehn's character, "On your feet, soldier." You could draw a direct line from Ripley's flamethrower to Linda Hamilton's pipe bomb to Sydney's phone call. From Nancy's booby traps to Jennifer's revenge, they didn't flip the genre entirely, but they bent it, warped it, and laid seeds for what was coming. So before horror got ironic and had that smug Reddit energy, before it got feminist, it accidentally got interesting, and those accidents left cracks, and cracks are where, well, something sharp could grow. Then came Sydney Prescott. She said, "Yeah, I've seen the movies, I know the rules." Scream was horror looking at itself going, "Oh shit, are we the bad guy?" Sydney didn't just fight the killer, she fought the template. It was meta, it was post-ironic, if you will. It wasn't the first time the genre held up a mirror, but it was the best, first most popular time that it held the mirror up to its own bullshit and then stabbed it. But here's the catch. Even Scream didn't let women write the story, they just let them snark at it, gossip, rally, and shame about it, like putting a sticky note on a guillotine that says, "This feels toxic." Still, it mattered. Sydney mattered. It gave the final girl a pulse. Not a voice yet, but, you know, something there to do aside from getting stabbed. 2009. Jennifer's body drops. Diablo Cody, Megan Fox, Karen Kusama. It was marketed like softcore horror porn. It was actually a subversive masterpiece, and mill critics acted like it keyed their card. The plot? A rock band girl sacrifices a girl to Satan for fame. And just tell me that's not Hollywood in a nutshell. But Jennifer doesn't die, she transcends, she becomes powerful, sexual, ravenous. You know, it's funny enough, on a side note, I do have a shape-shifting monster in my basement, and instead of making it a slasher icon, I just forced it to transform into late 2000s Megan Fox. Anyways, she becomes powerful and sexual, and the kind of girl who eats you and then leaves you on red, and then maybe posts your DMs with your name cropped out on the Instagram story. That's just for friends. Critics called it too girly, which, translation, it made me feel things I don't have the vocabulary for, and now I'm mad. Post #MeToo, Jennifer's Body's a feminist canon. It predicted the trauma economy, the commodification of suffering, and the weaponization of female rage. It said, you want to turn to mythologize our pain? Cool. We'll turn it into a monster you can't kill. Insert the 2009 reviews versus the post-2020 Twitter threads doing the we were wrong ritual in real time. It wasn't just horror, it was revenge porn, revenge myth. It wasn't final girl energy, it was the final boss. The real monsters got unmasked. Weinstein, Cosby, Spacey, a necrotic conga line of creeps, and the reaction, you can't do this to me, I'm the protagonist. Cancel culture is the final act of a slasher movie, but from the killer's POV, it's what happens when the knife slips, when the audience turns, when the final girl stabs back. The loudest voices against cancel culture are the same ones who cheered when girls were butchered for having sex on screen. And they weren't mad about punishment, they were mad that the shoe was on the other foot. And let's be clear, cancel culture isn't censorship, it's a very weird reckoning, and for once, the Scream Queen gets to scream back. So then there comes A24, everyone's favorite private equity firm at the film festival. The boutique label that asks, what if horror, but sad? What if monster, but mental illness? What if instead of sweaty teens getting chainsawed to death for boinking in the woods, we got 2 hours of creeping dread, unresolved mommy issues, and women crying in slow motion while violins threaten to break your bones from the inside out? Enter Midsommar. I'm going to skip Hereditary because that's been talked to death. I think Midsommar is more interesting to talk about in this context. It's a breakup movie that is like Ingmar Bergman's Persona meets The Wicker Man. It's wrapped in cult aesthetics, florals, and the unmistakable sensation of watching your soul leak out of your ears. Let's set the stage. Dani, played by Florence Pugh with the same face you make when your Lyft driver won't stop talking about his politics from the old boomer Facebook page, watches her family die. Flies to Sweden with her emotionally ghosted boyfriend, who's Christian, a man so useless he could be replaced with a decorative IKEA pillow. And speaking about IKEA, it's like an evil IKEA set. They land in this pagan death commune where everyone's white, barefoot, and aggressively empathetic. And by the end, she's the queen of the cult, foreshadowed to be their chosen one since she met them. Radiant, screaming, and liberated, like she just finished 10 years of therapy via human sacrifice. This wasn't a final girl, it was a final apotheosis. There was then Hereditary, which I said I wasn't going to talk about, but I mean, can you really trust a guy with a Jason mask? Which should be titled Motherhood Will Kill You, but first it will make you scream at your son at dinner. Toni Collette puts in a performance so uncomfortably raw, you feel like you should Venmo her a copay. This movie doesn't feature grief, it builds an altar to it. Your dead grandma is Satan's secretary, your kid's decapitated sister becomes a demon vessel, and you're watching the nuclear meltdown of family dynamics through your fingers, muttering, what the fuck, every 17 seconds like a Gregorian chant. Then we've got The Witch, ye olde puberty allegory, starring Anya Taylor-Joy and a goat named Black Phillip, who is unfortunately hot. It's about a Puritan girl becoming a witch, signing Satan's book, and finally finding freedom in a world where everyone thinks she's evil anyways. These aren't just horror films, they're feminine metamorphosis rituals performed in tone poem agony, and A24 horror says you want fear, well here's grief, here's gaslighting, here's generational rot, here's a raw chicken you're sexually confused about. These women don't escape the horror, they breathe it, they integrate it, they ascend through it, and they become the deities of their own wreckage. And slashers? Well, they were men imagining what women were scared of, but A24 is women showing you what they became after no one listened. It goes from survival to ascension. Modern horror doesn't give you Jason, it gives you human resources. It gives you the dean, the landlord, the nice guy who read one Bell Hooks quote and still owns a body pillow, or maybe he reads David Foster Wallace in public and browses r/Red Scare Pod. The monster now wears a badge or a suit or a podcast mic. I mean, look at the Babadook. It was grief in yoga pants, raw, hunger is identity crisis, revenge, the rape revenge arc through a female gaze and promising young woman. Well, it was a Greek tragedy that was millennial coded where the slasher is systemic. These films don't punish women for surviving, they punish men for assuming they're entitled to forgiveness. The final girl isn't surviving anymore, she's now hunting. Slasher started as the male fever dream about what women should fear, but then girls got tired of dying for the plot, they picked up the knife and the pen and the lens. Now horror just isn't about surviving the night, it's about rewriting the myth, because when women write the fear, the screams become a battle cry, the trauma's like a magical spell, and the final girl doesn't run, she burns the house down with the monster inside. Fear used to be authored by men. Now it's being rewritten. Fear used to be authored by men. Now it's being rewritten. Anyway, that's the video. I'm sweaty. My balls are wheezing like Michael Myers after cardio, and I may or may not have cried rewatching Jennifer's Body for the 12th time. Just remember to like, stab that subscribe button, and say something in the comments that would have gotten you canceled in 2019. And tell me, is cancel culture and the rise of anti-woke the new slasher villains, or is it the sequel where women get to fight back finally?